The day began like any other. Golden autumn light fell softly across the polished floors of Kensington Palace. Catherine, the Princess of Wales, sat quietly in her favorite armchair, with a warm cup of tea in her hands. The soft voices of her children still echoed in the hallways, their backpacks bouncing as they ran out the door for school. William had kissed her goodbye earlier that morning before leaving for a meeting about his wildlife conservation work. Oh, the palace was peaceful. Almost too quiet. Catherine smiled to herself. It felt like one of those slow, gentle mornings she had come to treasure. Then the phone rang. She glanced at the screen. William. A little surprised, she answered it quickly. Maybe he forgot something. Maybe he wanted to laugh about their weekend plans. But as soon as she heard his silence, something inside her changed. "Catherine," William said, his voice soft and shaking, "I need you to sit down." She was already sitting, but she straightened up, heart beating faster. "It's Lady Margaret. She passed away peacefully last night." The words were simple, but to Catherine, they felt heavy. Her hand tightened around the phone. She couldn't speak at first. Lady Margaret Thornfield was not just someone who worked for the royal family. She was part of their lives. For over 60 years, Lady Margaret had served the crown, first as a secretary to the Queen Mother, then as a private advisor. She had seen everything: weddings, funerals, births, and hard times. But most of all, she had been there for William and later. For Catherine too, Lady Margaret had always felt like a calm lighthouse in a sea of pressure. She had taught her how to move through royal life with grace. She had helped her feel strong when people doubted her. When Catherine was sick during her first pregnancy, Lady Margaret brought her warm gingered tea and kind stories. When the press attacked her background, Lady Margaret had reminded her of other strong royal women who came from ordinary families to William. Lady Margaret had been like a second mother. After Princess Diana's death, William was just a lonely, hurting teenage boy. Lady Margaret never tried to replace his mother, but she gave him quiet guidance. It's a soft encouragement and strong love that never needed to be said out loud. She was always there, always steady. "I keep thinking I should call her," William said, "even now. She was always the first person I told anything too good or bad." Catherine wiped her eyes, holding the phone tightly. "You know that. And she'd want us to carry on with dignity and heart, just like she did." "I'm coming home," he said. "There's a lot to do, and we need to let others know." When the call ended, Catherine sat in stillness. The blue and gold room around her suddenly felt cold and distant. She stared out the window, watching leaves fall in slow motion. It didn't feel real, but it was just 3 weeks ago. Lady Margaret had given Catherine a gift. A small box with a butterfly-shaped brooch inside. "For when you need a reminder of your own strength," she had said with a warm smile. The brooch had belonged to her grandmother, a lady-in-waiting to Queen Victoria now. Holding it in her hand, Catherine felt the weight of it, not just the metal, but the history, the love, and the goodbye. By noon, Catherine had already spoken to the palace staff. She asked for the blue sitting room to be prepared, Lady Margaret's favorite room, the one she always said felt most comforting. Word spread quietly that people could come and pay their respects. Catherine didn't know what the next hours would bring. She knew one thing. Lady Margaret had spent her life building quiet bridges between people, and now, in this moment of loss, those people would come together, not because they had to, but because they loved her, and because they wanted to say thank you. By early afternoon, the blue sitting room at Kensington Palace had changed. It was no longer just a quiet space with soft chairs and golden curtains. It had become a place of memories. A place where people came not just to grieve, but to share. Something real, something personal. The first knock on the door came. Just after 10 single quotes, Mrs. Eleanor Davies stood there with red, puffy eyes. She had worked as head housekeeper at Windsor Castle for almost 40 years. In her hands, she held a small wooden box worn at the edges. Catherine opened the door herself. "Your Royal Highness, I hope I'm not intruding," Mrs. Davies said. Softly. "Of course not," Catherine replied, taking her gently by the arm. "Lady Margaret would want us all together today." Inside the box were dozens of small letters, each handwritten, each signed with love, Margaret. Mrs. Davies explained that Lady Margaret had written her one every single week, even when she was on royal tours or sick in bed. The notes always asked about her health, her grandchildren, her garden, even the smallest things. Catherine smiled as she read one aloud. Dear Eleanor, I hope your grandson passed his maths exam. Tell him not to worry. Persistence always wins in the end. The roses are blooming beautifully this week. I think of you when I see them. Tears welled up again in Mrs. Davies' eyes. She remembered everything, she whispered. Made me feel like I mattered. More people came. One by one, they arrived at the palace, some nervous, others tearful, all carrying quiet stories. James Fletcher, a young page who had only worked at the palace for 2 years, stood shyly at the door. He looked unsure, holding his cap in his hands. I don't know if I should be here, he said. I didn't know her very long. Catherine gave him a warm smile. Come in. Tell me what she did for you. He sat near a sunny window and began to speak. On his very first day, he had spilled tea on an expensive antique carpet in the Queen's private study. He was certain he would be fired. But instead, Lady Margaret came over with a cloth and knelt beside him. She helped me clean it up, James said. And she told me she made the same mistake during her first week. Catherine laughed gently. I bet she made that up just to make you feel better. She probably did, James smiled. But it worked. Others followed. Robert Chen, the palace electrician, came with quiet steps. He shared how Lady Margaret once thanked him personally every time he fixed a broken light or repaired a switch. One day she learned he was trying to study computer programming at night. A week later, he received a scholarship offer. He never found out who recommended him until now. I owe my entire career to her, he said simply. Then came Sarah Williams, a young kitchen worker and single mother. Her regular babysitter once fell sick during a busy holiday week. Sarah thought she'd lose her job, but Lady Margaret showed up the next morning with a solution she had arranged for the palace nursery to watch her daughter. She told me, Every child deserves a safe place, Sarah whispered. I never forgot that, William returned. Home, just as these stories were being shared. He walked in silently, not wanting to interrupt. He sat beside Catherine, listening to the voices, young and old, sharing moments he had never heard before. She remembered my son's football matches, said Maria Santos, a woman from the laundry department. She never gossiped, never judged, she just cared. By late afternoon, the room was filled with people from every part of Palace. Life gardeners, guards, cooks, secretaries. Most had never spoken to each other before. Now, they shared stories, passed tissues, and held hands. She was the heart of this place, said Thomas Wright, the royal gardener. She didn't just serve the crown, she served people. Catherine looked around. For the first time that day, she felt something warm, something healing. The grief was still there, but it was softer now. Lady Margaret had left behind more than memories. She had built something invisible, but strong, a quiet family across the walls of the palace. And in this room, that family had come alive. The next morning, the sky over Windsor Castle was gray and quiet. The kind of morning that felt still, as if the world itself was taking a moment to breathe. William and Catherine arrived just after 9 a.m., walking hand in hand. It had been years since either of them had stepped into Lady Margaret's private apartment. Now they were there to say goodbye in the most personal way by going through her things. Her daughter, Helen, welcomed them with a soft smile and tired eyes. She had arrived from Scotland the night before. She always spoke so kindly of both of you, Helen said, her voice gentle. Especially you, Catherine. She said you had a gift for making people feel seen. Catherine felt tears gather in her eyes, but smiled politely. The room felt just like Lady Margaret's, simple, elegant, filled with small, meaningful touches. Photographs of royal events, handwritten cards, fresh flowers in little glass vases, and shelves lined with old poetry books. William looked around slowly. He spotted a small framed picture on the side table and picked it up. This was our first day at Clarence House, he said quietly. She told me once she was so nervous, she forgot to eat and almost fainted during the Queen Mother's briefing. Helen laughed softly. She loved that story. She told it often to remind people it's okay to be scared when you start something new. As they began sorting through drawers and files, Catherine opened a desk cabinet and paused. Inside were organized folders, each labeled in neat handwriting. One read, Education Support. Another said, Emergency Fund. What is this? She asked. She opened the first folder and gasped. William. Inside were pages of receipts, letters, and payment records. It showed that Lady Margaret had been quietly helping pay for university fees for 12 different students. One letter stood out. It was from a young woman named Amy Thompson, who had just become a doctor. Lady Margaret, I graduated yesterday with honors. None of this would have been possible without you. You believed in me when no one else did. I will spend my life helping others, just like you helped me. William sat down, staring at the letter. She never told us any of this, he said. Catherine nodded, her hands trembling as she flipped through more files. She didn't want praise. She just wanted to help. Another folder was filled with notes about emergency payments, a funeral bill paid for a gardener's father, medical bills for a housekeeper's child, even a veterinary bill for a sick dog belonging to a young guard. She helped everyone, Catherine whispered. She did it all in secret. They moved slowly into her bedroom. On her nightstand was a leather-bound journal. Catherine looked at Helen, who gave a small nod. She would want you to read it, she said. The entries were simple and short, written in clear, careful handwriting. Tuesday, helped Sarah with her babysitter problem. Glad the nursery staff could assist. Her daughter reminds me of Helen at that age. Friday, must remember to check if James's mom is getting proper medical help. He looked worried today. Sunday, William looks tired, too much on his shoulders. It helped me years ago. Catherine turned to the final pages and saw her own name. Catherine handled the hospital visit with such grace. The way she kneels to speak with the children, it reminds me of Diana, that same gentle strength. She will be a wonderful queen someday, in the back of the journal. Tucked carefully in an envelope was a letter marked, For William and Catherine. Their hands shook as they opened it. Inside was a handwritten message, written just 1 month earlier. My dear William and Catherine, if you are reading this, then my time has come. Please know that I've watched you with pride. You have grown into leaders of great kindness. The crown needs more hearts like yours. The letter continued with warmth and love. Her final words, a message of hope and encouragement. Lady Margaret had given her life to service. That she had given her heart. And now, in this quiet room, William and Catherine felt the full weight of her goodbye, just as royals, but as the people she had loved like family. The air was still as the chapel bells at Windsor began to ring. It was the day of Lady Margaret's farewell. The soft sound of the bells echoed through the quiet morning, and inside St. George's Chapel, white roses and lavender filled the space with a gentle scent. Just as she had written in her final wishes, the service would be simple, full of peace, and full of life, not sorrow. Catherine stood near the front, wearing a dark coat and a small butterfly brooch on her chest, the same one Lady Margaret had given her just weeks earlier. She reached up and touched it gently, feeling the smooth curve of the metal, the weight of its meaning. It no longer felt like just a gift. It felt like a message. William stood beside her, his face calm but thoughtful. Wasn't just there as the future king. He was there as the boy who had once leaned on Lady Margaret after losing his mother. Now he was a man carrying her lessons with him. Before the ceremony began, people filled the pews quietly. Not just royals, not just officials, but people from every part of Palace. Life gardeners, kitchen staff, young pages, housekeepers, and even people from charities she had quietly helped for years. James, the young page who once spilled tea, was there in full uniform, holding back tears. Sarah, the kitchen worker and mother, sat near the back with her little girl on her lap. Robert Chen, the electrician, came with a small flower pinned to his coat, lavender from Lady Margaret's favorite garden. And Mrs. Davies, the head housekeeper, clutched one of the many letters Lady Margaret had written her. They had all come for the same reason, not just to say goodbye. but to say thank you. The priest began the service by reading a passage Lady Margaret had chosen herself. It was a poem about kindness, about quiet strength, and how the smallest acts of love could change the world. As he read, many wiped their eyes, because it was true. Lady Margaret had changed their world not with money or power, but with handwritten notes, kind smiles, gentle help, and quiet support. William gave a short speech. She didn't need to speak loudly to be heard, he said softly. Lady Margaret believed in doing good quietly, without expecting praise. She believed that listening mattered more than shouting, and that love was stronger when shown in action. Catherine followed with just a few words, but they carried. Wait, she told me once that a strong woman is not one who shouts, Catherine said, but one who lifts others up without anyone noticing. That's exactly who she was. When the music played, no one moved for a moment. The chapel was full, yet it felt deeply personal. The white roses, the butterfly symbols, and even the hymn. Lyrics all felt like a perfect goodbye for someone who had done so much by staying out of the spotlight. After the service, the guests stepped out quietly. Some hugged, others shared soft words. But many simply looked up at the sky where the clouds had started to part and let a little sunlight shine through. Back at the palace, a small gathering took place in the blue sitting room. Tea was served, just as Lady Margaret would have wanted. Catherine walked among the guests, listening to their memories, offering comfort with a soft smile. William joined her, his presence calm and steady. They weren't just leading the royal family, they were holding space for love, for memory, and for every quiet kindness that had brought them all together. Later that evening, when the palace was quiet again, Catherine sat in her chair and opened Lady Margaret's journal one more time. On the last page, written in neat, careful handwriting, were just a few words. If I've helped even one heart feel lighter, then my life has been enough. Catherine read the words aloud to William. You helped many hearts, she whispered, into the stillness. And with that, she closed the journal. Lady Margaret Thornfield had left behind no titles, no headlines, no fame. But she had left behind something far greater: kindness, love, and a legacy that would never fade. And in the quiet strength of William and Catherine, her light would go on,